Now, how do we start to take the research literature and use it to our advantage and outsmart our gut brain? Fancy way of saying it, but gastric satiation is volumetric, while intestinal satiation is nutritive. In a nutshell, this is saying it matters more bulk or volume in our stomach that then will send signals to the brain that we're full. It's the distension of the gastric lining that triggers the neural impulses telling the brain, we should stop now, we're probably satisfied. Whereas the signals, the neural networks that go from the gastrointestinal tract down the small intestine, large intestine, and so forth, those signals are much more influenced by the chemical makeup of the foods we eat, the nutritional composition. As one example, CCK or cholecystokinin is just one element that it will more intensely signal to the brain we're full based on the amount of fats and proteins that are in the intestine. That actually gives some credence to the suggestion some people make for kind of lowering the caloric intake per sitting by saying before you eat a large meal, 15 to 20 minutes before, pop a handful of almonds. Something that is somewhat nutritious, good balance of fats and proteins. The 15 or 20 minutes to take will take it to get down to the intestinal tract might then give you a head start and sooner in the process save you a couple hundred calories of this large meal you're sitting down to enjoy. Other issues that will help us increase our sense of fullness and satiety. Data suggests that people who are put on high protein liquid diets tend to report being hungry again in half the time than if we had given them that protein in solid form. In 90 minutes, you ingest several grams of protein, you're going to report, yeah, I need something else now. Same amount of protein ingested by a fillet of chicken, could be meat, fish, what have you. It's usually about 3 hours later that people are then reporting that they're hungry. Flaxseed has probably more evidence supporting it as a supplement, as a nutritional component in promoting a sense of fullness than any other kind of supplemental or alternative approach. And why small meals and slower consumption would be a good dietary habit to get into? Because the data suggests that 40% of the calories we consume in a large meal is in our small intestine before we're even done eating. That suggests that if we can actually not consume all these calories in 10 minutes and give our body some time to have its natural signaling mechanisms tell our brain, no, you probably don't want any more, you can slow down. We're allowing our body's natural process and energy regulatory mechanisms to be able to work. Other things that stabilize energy, people who have breakfast each morning. Ideally, it's going to be a good source of protein as well. That's going to actually help lower hunger mid-late morning. Why? Because when cortisol spikes, as it does for most of us, and then declines, the lack of energy can be associated with, hey, I need some more energy, let me take in calories, when that actually may not be necessary. Just like protein intake of fiber at the same time you have any kind of carbohydrates, it's going to slow the metabolism. Pair those two together would be important. And that's really important because maintaining stable blood sugar is critical for us in terms of energy levels. Now, the study came out of the journal Neurology just a few months ago. And what they had done was that several hundred people were followed for 4 years. And the first day of the study, nobody had a metabolic disorder, no pre-diabetes or diabetic problems. But everyone was in the normal range of blood sugar, fasting blood sugar. Some were high normal, some were low normal. It turns out that over the course of 4 years, they do brain scans, finding out that over time their hippocampus shrunk to some degree, as it does for us as we age. But the 10% of that shrinkage was due to the fact that some people were in the high end of normal of blood sugar versus those who are at the low end. So that blood sugar dysregulation really was a precursor for changes neuroanatomically in our brain that might result in anything from poor short-term memory, poor concentration, and the like. Any foods that are going to elevate tryptophan and melatonin, that could be nuts, cherries, certain dairy products, are going to help regulate the sleep-wake rhythm. And in addition to CoQ10, probably ribose is second in terms of how much evidence there is to support it at least being considered. Do your due diligence. But ribose is a central element in ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so that actually may be something that will also address a person's fatigue along with CoQ10. And so I mentioned about mild dehydration. Why is that so important? Well, if in fact the dehydration is confused with hunger, we take in calories we don't need necessarily, and that leads to weight gain in an inflammatory process. That's one pathway. But the second reason is because if we're even mildly dehydrated, our blood is thicker, requiring more effort from our cardiovascular system to pump that blood throughout our body, therefore requiring more energy that wouldn't necessarily be required otherwise. A couple of other studies to keep in mind, a crossover study where what they did for 1 month, they randomly counterbalanced the order it happened. But if you were in the study, over the course of 3 months, there was 1 month where you had a greater proportion of your calories come from carbohydrates, a second month where a greater proportion was coming from fats, and a third month that a greater proportion was coming from protein. Turns out that it was the protein-rich diet that led to fewer reports of fatigue, greater reports of energy, greater sense of fullness and satiety, less reports of being hungry. Second study, not sure why they only use women, but they had women coming into the study. They were randomly assigned to one of 3 different groups. They were told, don't change anything about, we're not dieting, this is not a diet, don't change your diet at all, don't exercise more. But for 1/3 of the women, they were told, eat 3 apples a day for 10 weeks. Second group, eat 3 pears a day for 10 weeks. And a third group, eat 3 oatmeal cookies. That's the group most people want to be in, right? Well, it turns out that within 10 weeks, there was no statistically significant difference between the apple and the pear group, but both those fruit groups absolutely lost more weight than the oatmeal cookie group. They lost on average 2 pounds in 2.5 months. The cookie group gained 1.5 pounds. They lost weight and they weren't instructed to lose weight. They were instructed to change nothing else, but we suspect they didn't do a calorie count. The increased fiber and nutritional components of that fruit were enough to kind of have people feel more satisfied throughout the day and less eating calorie-dense foods. But here's one that actually hit the newspapers. You might have actually read this one. Out of Yale University, they were measuring ghrelin, the appetite stimulating hormone. And lo and behold, people would come in on 2 different days. One day, 1 week, another day, the next week. And they were actually given the same 380 calorie shake each day that they came in, but they were told something very different. On one day, they were told this is a very indulgent 600+ calorie shake. On a different day, they came in and they were told, oh, this is a sensible, healthy day. This is a shake that's only got 140 calories in it. Well, they told them this, and then they drew their ghrelin levels an hour before, 5 minutes before ingesting the shake, and an hour after having the shake. It turns out it's the same shake, but substantially higher ghrelin levels before and greater reductions after they had what they thought was this indulgent shake versus the healthy shake. So even overriding sometimes the nutritional components is our mind, the body will follow where the mind takes it.